Hello, and welcome to The Pouch, the cleverly written protest placard of podcasts that helps the average Aussie make sense of their current political environment. I'm Gregg. Koalas may just be the greatest living animal ever. Savage.
And I'm Jake. Hopefully fewer ums this week, Far Wharton. On today's episode, we give you your essential as water weekly roundup of Australian political news, and Gregg asks the tough questions.
Jake, this week I want to know, while we're snug as a bug in a rug in this pouch, I want to know the 5 W's of protesting in Australia.
And we're also going to bring you up to speed on the whereabouts of that colourful larrikin, Clive Palmer. And no, he's not dead.
Well, Jake, what a week we've had. Everything not political is still political. And I think it's been a week which has focused a lot on protests. I really do think that protests have been dominating the news. They've been dominating people's minds. We had an enormous protest rally here in Sydney. I know that there were equally as huge protest well, not equally as huge, but certainly significant protest rallies around the country, protesting various things. And we'll get to that in a second. What's your take?
There were protests at capital cities across the country, I believe, on Friday. And as a part of that, there was a lot of animosity, certainly directed towards the Prime Minister and the, I suppose, lack of action, at least the perception of a lack of action regarding the, action on climate change, I suppose. But just to juxtapose, the will of the people across the nation, certainly in the major capital cities, just to juxtapose that, we had the Member of Parliament, Craig Kelly, who is a Liberal politician, and invariably, it is to be noted, he is a climate change denier. He went on the notable British interviewer Piers Morgan's show on ITV in the UK, and was interviewed on the bushfires and on the government's reaction to the bushfires, the federal government's reaction to the bushfires, that is. And he was...
It really backfired, didn't it? It really backfired, this interview.
Backfired.
I do wonder why. I wonder what goes through politicians' heads sometimes when they say yes to these interviews, when they say, yeah, I'm going to go on this TV show and I'm going to, have this interview. It's obvious that it's not going to go well from the start, from what I can see. If you've got those sort of views and you've got that sort of interviewer, Piers Morgan doesn't hold back. And, they have so much clout. They have so much carry on social media. He ended up calling the host, Laura Tobin, an ignorant pommy weather girl on his Facebook page, which of course backfired as well. He ended up deleting it. She's ended up on the project over here in Australia. The whole situation really backfired for him, didn't it?
It certainly did. And I mean, you asked the question, why would a Member of Parliament take this type of interview? I mean, ITV is an affiliate of Sky News, and Sky News is, they are known to be fairly conservative, and certainly in Australia, late night television, which, it was morning TV in the UK, which is in Australia, that is, afternoon or late night TV. So there's probably a good chance that that Craig Kelly was thinking, look, it's going to be a total cakewalk. We're going to talk about the farce of climate change. We're not going to need to do any action. Everybody's going to be on my side. We're not going to worry about this. It's going to be great. I think that's what was going through his head.
Yeah, and, raising money is certainly one thing that's been happening. We know that Shane Warne decided to raise a bit of money this week with his baggy greens going on, I don't know whether it was eBay. I don't know how he ended up doing it.
Yeah, I think he did it on his website, but
did he? Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the baggy greens.
Gosh, I didn't know he was a coder. I didn't know he could code how to set up an auction on his website. He must have a lot of time on his hands.
The great thing is, Greg, if you don't need to be a coder anymore in order to launch your website, you can just go to godaddy.com. No, I love it. So
apparently.
So allegedly. So look, it was a bit of a master stroke, essentially. Shane Shane Warne auctioned off his so-called baggy greens or hat, formal wear essentially as part of one of the tests that he was a part of in the past. The hat went for $1 million, which will be donated directly to the fire appeal. But I hear actually you got involved as well.
Yeah, absolutely, Jake. Look, I want to use my fame, to its advantage as well. I want to use my influence, with this podcast. I want to use this platform. I think just the sheer number of people who are listening to this. I really wanted to dig deep and figure out how I can use my own platform to raise awareness and raise money for the bushfire victims here in Australia. So I've decided, I've been inspired by Shane Warne, and I have actually put my own hat on eBay. You can search for it. It's at Gregg Savage's hat. So you just GREGGSAVAGE''S hat. I'm sure you can all spell hat. So Gregg Savage's hat, punch that into eBay and it's up on eBay, Jake. I just wanted to do my bit.
Michael Pengilly, the mayor of Kangaroo Island. Kangaroo Island, of course, was essentially half of Kangaroo Island has been wiped out by bushfires.
Tragic.
Yeah, absolutely. Very, very, very tragic. I believe 2 people lost their lives in those fires. And, the international response, as you say, was quite interesting. Barack Obama, the former US president, put out a plea for support, pointing to the fact that this is essentially the new reality. The climate is changing. The foliage, the leaves and bark and branches, etc., that fall to the floor and dry out. They're drier than they ever have been. We're getting less rainfall, etc. So Obama essentially, stated, hey, these are the new normals. Guys, we need to get behind this. We need to act on climate change. Michael Pengilly, the mayor of Kangaroo Island, again, just half of the place was wiped out. But he tweeted back to Obama, calling him wrong and pathetic for linking the fires that took half of the island to climate change impacts.
Certainly, the importance of mayors in everyone's town shouldn't be underestimated. I know that here in the Blue Mountains, our mayor has just been fantastic with keeping us up to date with information, sharing sympathies, sharing resources, discussing how the money from the federal government is going to be used. I think mayors have really had their time to stand up and stick up for their local areas as well.
100%, Greg. And when it comes to these natural disasters, forgetting about the day-to-day running of a township or a city, mayors are incredibly important people, as are the councillors that work with them. But in the situation of a natural disaster, the mayors and the councillors are those local representatives that knock on doors and say, how are you going? What do you need, etc. All of which is fed up the food chain to, or fed up the hierarchy to those that can provide on the ground, or that can provide, the broader support and services, etc. So having mayors and councillors on the ground is so important in these things. But definitely, it was a bit of an unfortunate event to have this mayor, publicly calling out the former US President Barack Obama for something which is a scientifically verified fact.
Jake, this week, I want to know the 5 W's of protesting in Australia. I'm angry. We're all very angry. We're angry at ScoMo. We're angry at the lack of empathy that he has brought to this situation. I'm angry at the, this is the royal eye. I am angry at, the fires themselves. I'm angry that we didn't take action earlier. I want to get out there and I want to take my witty, well-written placard out there and I want to, give it to everyone. I really want to make a change today. So what can I do?
Yeah, Greg, in terms of the protests that have occurred, I suppose in the last year, there's been quite a few notable ones. We had the anti-Adani convoy led by the former Greens leader Bob Brown, in the lead up to the election, and there was a lot of counter protests against that. There was a series of vegan protesters or animal activists, I think they refer to themselves as, that stormed into farms in order to, inverted commas, liberate animals. Yeah. So, and then of course we also had the emergence of the Extinction Rebellion, those protesters that, have been performing acts of civil disobedience. But the number and scale of the protests have led several states to act on implementing new laws or new legislation around protests.
So, Jake, I imagine that's a pretty difficult line to tread for each state. Each state is trying to, control their civilians. Each state is trying to, maintain civil law and obedience, keep people calm. I suppose, that's got to lead to different laws and rules for each different state.
Yeah, it does. And it's a really good and important way to phrase it, because a lot of the laws are around, ensuring that people, have the right to protest, but ensuring that they do so in a way that doesn't affect, the state's economic productivity, which is a, fairly important thing. So I might review a couple of the states, but Queensland, they passed in November laws to ban locking devices used by the activists such as the Extinction Rebellion during their acts of civil disobedience. New South Wales, they introduced a new $1,000 on-the-spot fines through their existing biosecurity regulations. They're also considering a beefing up of their existing trespass penalties, essentially saying if you're trespassing on Crown land or Commonwealth land, etc., you need a permit to do so, you can't protest there.
Okay, fair enough.
In Western Australia, major mining and agriculture area. The current premier but former opposition leader, Mark McGowan, he had essentially said he was absolutely not in support of anti-protest laws in the past, but his government has said that it will increase penalties for trespass, i.e. protests carried out on farms, etc. He's not a big fan of those vegan protesters, the so-called animal activists, referring to them as, quote, mushy-headed vegans.
Look, that never does anyone any favors, does it, when you start calling people, petty names like that? Maybe it works for our friends over there in the United States, but I don't think that Australians look too favorably on anyone calling anyone sort of those unnecessary names. And what about our friends down south there in Victoria and Tasmania? I know that Tasmania is filled with angry people, Jake, filled with angry people ready to hit the streets. All of that organic, delicious, locally grown produce.
Oh, don't forget the salmon as well.
Sent them angry. They're craving to get out there and tell everyone what they think. What are their rules around there?
Absolutely. So Victoria and Tasmania are quite interesting. Both states are actually reviewing the need for new laws. Tasmania very recently dismantled their previous anti-protest laws, which were built around the whole. Were
there protests against that, Jake? Were there protests against dismantling the protest laws?
That's always fun. Probably not that I'm aware of, but most likely, certainly when
we'll look into it.
Absolutely, we'll get our best people on it.
I'll get our producer onto it.
Oh, fantastic. So, it was quite interesting. The Tassie laws that had been dismantled were put in place to prevent activists from chaining themselves to trees in old growth forests that were due to be cut down for pulp mills, etc. And in Victoria is funny in that they have traditionally allowed protest, and they are a fairly progressive, at least socially, type of state. They were lambasted quite a bit, particularly on social media recently after they gave a $1 fine to an activist that stole a goat. When I say stole, I mean in inverted commas liberated a goat from a cafe in Melbourne. So
look, that's worth it, isn't it? I mean, look, you probably want to go a bit more than $1. I think if you're an activist, you go, well, look, $1 is not very much, and I make a point and I make the news. Surely stealing a goat in Australia should be worth more than $1. And now it's time for Where in the World is Clive Palmer? Jake, I was in Townsville when Clive Palmer's nickel refinery closed, and it was a tragic time for the little city of Townsville. People losing their jobs, people having to move towns. It was just a tragic time, and finding jobs that they weren't really interested in doing in the first place, lesser paid jobs, just basically people scrambling for anything that they could find. He wasn't very popular after that. No. Certainly not in Townsville, but he still has a bit of a following nationally. People still resonated with his ideas, as whacked out as they appeared to be. Where is he? What's he doing? Where is he gone? Where is this larger than life character?
That's actually a really good way to phrase. He is a larger than life character, and both metaphorically and physically, he's a very tall, very big, robust man. I run into him occasionally. I've said g'day to Clive a couple of times. He spends
really?
Yeah. He's
does he go to your gym or something?
No. It's funny. Every Friday I go into the city to get myself a sleeve of Nescafe, of the Nespresso stuff for my next week of work, and he is regularly either walking out of the Tattersalls Men's Club or walking out of the. Walking out of the Commonwealth Bank there, the major business bank there. So
this is what you've got for us as first-hand information. This is not just stuff that you've
I've tapped him on the back and I said, "What are you up to, buddy?"
Buddies, you and Clive hang out.
Yeah.
So what was the last thing he said to you when he was outside of Tattersalls Gentlemen's Club?
He said, "G'day, mate." I said, "Hello, Clive." That was it. It's very short interactions. It's very, very short, very, very quick interactions. He's known for that. Very, very quick on his feet.
So what's he up to at the moment? What's he doing?
Yeah. So look, a little bit of background on Clive. He's definitely a real character, an enduring force for conservative political activism, both at a local, a state, and a federal level. He's a billionaire. Recently, he was estimated at just over $4 billion. He's got plenty of holdings in mining companies, be it coal, iron ore, nickel, as you mentioned. He's got holdings in resorts, golf clubs. He's also reputed. There's been years of speculation and announcements around his ambition to build a Titanic 2. I think I
was ready for that.
Yeah, I think we're all ready for it because I think it was announced in 2012, and
it's certainly something the nation needs, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. What we really need is a boat that can't sink that sinks. So, he's been in and out of politics for pretty well the last 50 years, since the mid 70s. He's been a Liberal.
Really? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, he's been a Liberal member of Parliament. He's been leader of the Palmer United Party, which it actually launched the careers of such notables as Senator Jackie Lambie, who's back in Parliament, however, not as a Palmer United Party senator, and Andrew Yang. We all know Andrew Yang.
Classic Yang.
Yeah. He's a Western Australian. I can't remember whether he got into
punching him into Google now.
He very quickly, he did not last very long, but Andrew Yang, very interesting guy. So in the 2019 federal election, Palmer ran candidates in virtually every single House of Reps and senatorial seat across the country. He spent $60 million of his own money. Maybe that's not so much when you compare with his personal wealth of $4 billion, but still quite a lot of money.
Hopefully that's as much as I make selling my hat on eBay, Jake. You can search
crossed.
for that at Gregg Savage's hat, GREGG_SAVAGE hat at eBay. Hopefully we get up to that $60 million
60 million.
Mark.
And I hear Clive is going to match it dollar for dollar.
Absolutely. He's that sort of bloke. Yeah.
Yeah. Not guaranteed. But yes. So he actually, the interesting thing is with this $60 million, he actually invested more than the Liberal National Party and Labor together for that election, and he received 0 seats. The tactic, though, was essentially to use the Australian preferential voting system to funnel votes towards the Liberal National Party, which, broadly speaking, quite successful. But and
I'll be using the same tactic for when my hat only sells for $1. I'll be saying, no, the original tactic was to guide you in the direction of other
charities
where you can other fundraising efforts where you can donate your money that way. It's also my political. Me and Clive are very close,
politically savvy.
Great minds think alike.
Yeah, exactly. Business savvy. Absolutely. I'm 100% with you. But look, as for where he actually is, he lives on the Gold Coast at the picturesque Sovereign Islands gated community in Queensland. And very recently, I suppose the only notable stuff that we've heard of him very recently is that he made his helicopter and boats available to those affected by the fires in New South Wales, which was quite an interesting thing. But colourful character. I think much the same as other characters that we've reviewed in the past. He is somebody who I think the political system in Australia would be remiss to not have a part of the political landscape.
Well, they certainly get backing, don't they? And they certainly do end up with followers, some of these colourful characters, so I can see exactly what you mean. It's good to know where he is, and make sure you say hi to him next time you bump into him outside of the Tattersalls Club.
Yeah, I will.
Love from the pouch.
Love from the pouch. I'm not sure I want him listening.
Sounds like a t-shirt.
Love from the pouch, yeah.
Sounds like a band.
Yeah.
Love from the pouch, yeah. Maybe an SBS movie.
Late at night.
All right, Jake. Look, Jake, it's been a huge week, and that brings us to the end of today's podcast. I'm nearly in tears. I'm so sad that I may even protest about the end of this podcast today.
Such a pleasure, Greg, and thank you very much to the listeners for taking the time to subscribe to the podcast. You can follow us on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook by searching for The Pouch, the podcast. And thank you very much to the listeners for listening. It's always such a pleasure to research all of these topics. So thank you very much.
No worries. And just a side note as well, our producer did spend a little bit of their week putting together thepouchthepodcast.com. So if you want to direct your friends there, you can. And it's certainly a great central hub just to find out where you can listen to us and follow us on social media as well.
Fantastic.
Now, I was thinking about maybe calling this segment Jake's Explainer by Jake and having like a little ditty that goes, Jake's Explainer by Jake.
Can we add Jake one more time in there?